Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 25 mini-series with the Seattle Mariners. And we have just began the 2024 to 2025 offseason. 2024 was a relatively successful year for Seattle. We upended both Houston and Texas to win the American League West. But unfortunately, we did get swept in a wild card series against those Astros. They beat us 3-2 in both games, so it was a hard-fought series. But when all was said and done, it was still a very early exit for the Mariners. That said, ownership was only hoping that we would have a winning record, and we made the playoffs. So we exceeded expectations there, and we do have a goal to make the playoffs in 2025. At the end of our last episode, we went over our roster and started laying out what we thought our plan for this offseason might be. And we've simmed ahead a couple of days, and we made a couple of trades to hopefully help us execute on that plan. At a high level, we're not really looking for much pitching this offseason. We had the fifth fewest runs allowed in the American League last year, and that was with our ace, George Kirby, pitching just one inning on the season on opening day before he needed elbow surgery. So my thought is that if some of our young pitchers continue to improve and Kirby comes back in May or June, hopefully pretty close to what he was before, our pitching should organically, hopefully be even a little better than it was this past season. So the goal is to spend most of our resources this offseason trying to improve an offense that was mediocre at best. We were good at hitting home runs, but I believe we finished 11th in the league in scoring, and that's just not going to be good enough. So in an effort to hopefully open up some money to help us add some impact offensive players this offseason, we've made a few trades at this point. First one that we didn't talk about in the last episode was that we sent Josh Rojas, who had a major league contract and was set to make around $3.5 million next year if we made an arbitration offer to him, despite the fact he only had 5 at-bats with us in the majors this year. Just didn't see him being great value at the age of 30. So we traded him, got the 4A first baseman Chris Gittens, who's got great power in return. And then we got Corey Julks from the Astros, who could be in the mix to be a 4th or 5th outfielder for us next year. Not claiming that he's incredible, but he makes the major league minimum. He's got option years left, and he's respectable defensively, respectable on the base paths, and hopefully will hit enough to be a useful 4th or 5th outfielder. So it gives us a little optionality there, and then they also gave us some cash in return, which helped. We also made a trade that we were talking about at the end of last episode. This was one that cost us a bit in terms of resources, but we needed to get Mitch Haniger off the books. He had opted into the final year of his contract at $15.5 million. We felt he was very poor value. We still had to retain 35% of that contract, but even doing that, that clears up almost $10 million off of our books. Haniger has been a well below offensive player for the last couple of seasons in the majors. To bring him on board, or to get him off board more accurately, we had to include a number of minor leaguers, none of whom are really big-time prospects. Jimmy Joyce is probably the guy that I like giving up the least, but he also tore his UCL just about a month and a half ago. So as a guy who's going to be turning 26 shortly and hasn't made it to the majors yet, I don't think he's a big-time player for us. Reed Van Scoter, Teddy McGraw, Anthony Tomczak, the other guys that we had to include, mainly to just get the retention down to a more reasonable level. And we ended up bringing on the shortstop Nick Gordon in return. 29 years old. He is arbitration eligible, so he's going to make about $1.5 million next year. We like his glove. We like the leadership and personality that he brings to the clubhouse. He's a good bunter. He's a decent base runner. The bat is clearly a question, but feel like he does help improve our offense in the middle of the infield. And offensively, at least last season, he wasn't really worse than some of the guys that we were playing out there who aren't as good defensively. So felt bringing on the left-handed hitting Gordon along with the right-handed hitting Nick Allen, who we traded for right before the trade deadline last year. We've got some higher quality defensive infielders. The question is how much they're going to hit for us. But I think mixing in Gordon and Allen with Crawford and Moore, who will likely be holdovers, hopefully we've got the middle of the infield covered for next season. And we can really devote our attention in free agency in the trade market to maybe improving our corner infielders and our corner outfielders, or some combination thereof. And we did just make another trade that I'll talk about here. This was really more of a cash opening move than anything else. Traded away second baseman Jorge Polanco. We had a team option for $12 million on him. Coming off a below average offensive season. Also not as talented defensively as the likes of Allen and Gordon that we've recently traded for. His hitting profile is better than theirs, but he's also older than either of those players. I mentioned coming off a bad year, set to make $12 million. So we wanted to see what we could get in return for him. And then we also included Trent Thornton and Austin Voth. Voth was the fifth starter for us for a good chunk of this year and was not particularly effective. Both of those guys are arbitration eligible now, set to be making close to $2 million. Just didn't think that either of them was good value. And then we also included a couple of minor leaguers, not big-time prospects. And what we got in return was Christian Vasquez. Only 1 year of him. He's set to make $10 million next year, but with the talent we sent to the Twins, they retained most of his contract. Gives us a captain personality, a really good defensive catcher, and I think that he would work very well with Cal Raleigh to give us two good defensive catchers, start Raleigh against right-handed pitching as we did this past year, and Vasquez against left-handed pitching, which will upgrade our defense behind the plate. Also give us the captain personality that I talked about, which we don't have right now unless we were willing to re-sign Elvis Andrus, which we probably won't. The tough part about this is that the contract I haven't been able to get off the books and will not be able to get off the books is Mitch Garver, who is now a third catcher for us. He's set to make $11.5 million next year, $12.5 million the year after, and his contract is viewed as one of the worst in baseball. Even if we were to retain 80-ish% of the contract, we have to take back an awful contract in return. So I think we're kind of just stuck with Garver, at least for this upcoming season. But my thought is maybe we turn him into an infielder, a first baseman more specifically, because that's really the only position he can play. He could still be an emergency catcher for us behind Raleigh and Vasquez. And he can probably start for us as a first baseman against left-handed pitching. It's not an ideal situation, and with the money he's making, it's certainly a contract I wish we didn't have, But as I said, there's not really any realistic way to get him off the books. We'd have to be giving up 2 or 3 of the best prospects in our system just to get down to 40 or 50% retention on his contract. And that doesn't make sense to me. So his contract is viewed by the market as worse than Haniger's, which means that we'll be keeping Mitch Garver, and we already traded away Mitch Haniger. Other than that, in terms of money-saving moves, we're not going to offer Luis Urias, and we're not going to offer Sam Haggerty. They were set to make about $6 million and about $2 million each. They both have essentially no trade value. I would have tried to get something for them, and I did try to get something for them, but there's just no interest in either of those players. So at this point, unless something changes between now and the end of the arbitration period and the beginning of free agency, we're just going to let them hit the open market. We have made offers to every other one of our arbitration eligible players. So with the fact that we're kind of going to pigeonhole Garver in as a potential first baseman / corner outfielder for us, it makes me think that the plan that I had kind of talked about at the end of last episode of maybe going for a first and third base combination is not really the way to go anymore. I had talked about maybe a Pete Alonso to join us at first base, along with some other players that were potential first basemen who were expected to be upcoming free agents, and then maybe going after someone like Gleyber Torres to become a third baseman for us. With the fact that we're going to move on from Urias, I think the third base is still in play, and Torres could potentially fill that role for us. But with the fact that we've traded away Polanco's $12 million contract that could have been on our books, we've traded away Haniger's, or more accurately, 65% of Haniger's contract. We're going to move on from Urias. We're going to move on from Thornton. We're going to move on from Voth. We've opened up some money. And when you look at our front office now, we've also cut our scouting and player development budgets a bit. But we are going to have some money available when free agency starts. So my hope is that at the very least, we will be able to potentially target, if I could click properly, it would be easy for me to talk about this, potentially target an addition like Torres. But I'm also secretly thinking about possibly trying to bring Juan Soto on board. Coming off of a monster year with the Yankees, led the league with 50 homers, also drove in 115 runs, put up a 165 WRC plus. I just think that pairing a 26-year-old free agent Juan Soto in the middle of our lineup with J-Rod would give us an absolutely dynamic 3-4 or 2-3 combination, depending on where we decided to hit them. I don't still know if financially we're going to be able to make it work. I think we could definitely do Soto if we didn't do Torres. The trick is going to be trying to do both of them, which would let the offense potentially take a really big step forward. It's going to mean that we're not going to be doing anything to pitching, but as I kind of noted already, I don't think we need to do a ton to improve our pitching staff. We basically just have to hope that Kirby comes back healthy and well. We also are going to offer Paul Goldschmidt a qualifying offer for $18.9 million. This could come back to bite us. Not that Goldschmidt is a bad player. He's obviously an excellent player. He says he's looking for 4 years at over $20 million a year. So I tend to think he's going to refuse our offer and hit free agency looking for a longer term deal. And I'd love to get the compensatory pick for him. But there is a risk that he does opt in which case we've hampered ourselves a little bit. If Goldschmidt opts in at that amount, we definitely can't bring on both Torres and Soto. I think we could easily bring on Torres with Goldschmidt. Bringing on Soto with Goldschmidt would be pretty tricky, but to be honest, bringing on Torres and Soto together is going to be pretty tricky. But I tend to think he's going to opt out of the contract, or more accurately, refuse the QO. And I'd love to get the compensatory pick from him to help bolster this Mariners farm system. So a lot of things are going to have to fall into line for this to be a big-time offseason for us. But I think it's possible that without paring the scouting and development budgets down to complete bare bones levels, we could bring on Soto and another pretty useful player. Garver is the problem. If we had been able to trade away Garver without retaining most of his contract and or taking on a crappy contract in return, I'd feel a lot more comfortable with the fact that we've made the QO to Goldschmidt, because at that point we'd almost be hoping that Goldschmidt opted in for a year, given that we like his bat and we just don't want to make a 4-year commitment to a guy in his late 30s and early 40s, and we'd have a similar-ish amount of money coming off the books with the departure of Garver. But with the fact that we're going to kind of force Garver into a first base platoon for us, and a well overpaid first base platoon, just because we've got this bad contract and there's not a lot we can realistically do for it. I think my hope is then that Goldschmidt will opt out and will potentially have the money to chase after Soto and or Torres and maybe some other players, assuming that they all hit free agency. Clearly, if Soto and Torres don't hit free agency, we've made a lot of moves to open up a lot of cash, and we're going to be potentially spending it on second-tier players. And in that situation, we'd probably be hoping that Goldschmidt opts in. So there's a lot of ways this can go, but we're going to start simming forward through this salary arbitration period, getting ready for free agency. And it should be a somewhat interesting award season for our Seattle Mariners, because I don't think we're going to have an MVP or a Cy Young Award winner, but J-Rod did lead the American League in batter war, and despite an 8-8 record, Logan Gilbert did lead the American League in pitcher war. So I would think both of those players are going to get some attention for those awards. I don't think either's going to win it, but it'll be interesting to see how they do in the balloting in the coming weeks. And our arbitration offers going very well. Brown, Gordon, Saucedo, Kirby, Logan Gilbert, Jason Adam, and Gabe Spire all avoiding arbitration with those players. The fans very excited to have Gilbert back and excited to have Kirby back as well. The only benefit of Kirby's injury is that his arbitration number this year was low. You can see we signed him for about $2 million, or exactly $2 million. Still out another 5 to 6 months. So he's going to miss spring training. Hopefully we'll have him back before the All-Star break. But happy to have all of these guys on board at this point, looking at arbitration. Really just waiting on Raleigh at this point. I'm going to continue potentially trading or exploring trading Urias and Haggerty. But as I noted, demand for both of those gentlemen is very low. And despite the fact that our offense was not great this past season, we did have a Silver Slugger Award for Julio Rodriguez, not surprisingly, in center field. And as we talked about, we are, I don't want to say cautiously optimistic, but we're hopeful that perhaps another Silver Slugger winner in Juan Soto will be joining him in the middle of our lineup going forward. Looks like still no extension with the Yankees, and we are now only 13 days away from free agency filing, so there's a chance that Mr. Soto will be on the market. And we've made it to the big awards. Shane Bieber, unanimous Cy Young Award winner in the American League, 18-8 with a 2.84 ERA and 227 strikeouts. Gilbert, who, as we talked about, led the American League in pitcher WAR, ended up finishing 7th in the voting. His teammate Luis Castillo, 16-6 with a 3.16 ERA, second in the AL Cy Young Award voting. So clearly with those two, if Kirby comes back strong next year, I really like our top three pitchers. In the National League, another unanimous winner, Logan Webb, 18-11 with a 2.56 ERA for the Giants. Ohtani, after a monster season as a designated hitter, wins the NL MVP, despite the fact that he was recovering from his injury to his pitching arm much of the year. He had an excellent batting season, leading the National League in at-bats, runs, homers, ribbies, and slugging percentage. And if you were looking carefully at his profile page, you'll see he actually came back and he pitched 3 games at the end of the season for the Dodgers, had a 6.75 ERA in 14 2/3 innings, allowed 5 home runs, so he was not particularly effective. But they're still probably pretty pleased that he is healthy at this point, and he actually got some pitching action last year. And J-Rod wins the Most Valuable Player award. I thought that perhaps Soto, with the monster season he had, might edge him. Soto and Judge of the Yankees finished 2-3 in the voting, despite a very disappointing season on the field for the Yankees. But Julio Rodriguez only led the American League in one category, but it was WAR at 6.9, played really good defensive center field for us, won a Silver Slugger, as we talked about, 309 batting average, 37 homers, 96 ribbies, 19 steals, 152 WRC plus, and the 23-year-old is officially a Most Valuable Player at this point, and we would love to figure out a way to pair him with a 26-year-old who just finished second behind him in the voting. That would be a huge step forward for our offense here in Seattle, and if Soto does make it to free agency, the moves that we've made this offseason to cut ties with a number of useful players that were making pretty decent money could potentially be rewarded. And we're getting close to needing to make a decision on our arbitration eligible players. So we figured we would check in on Urias again, and as you can see here, I wasn't completely lying to you with what I said before. Have to basically take on a pretty awful contract to get him off the books. But one guy who is now being offered that wasn't when we checked in on him a while back is Oslevis Basabe of the Yankees, 24-year-old shortstop. Has had major league action with Tampa and the Yankees over the last couple of seasons. He is a guy who does have option years left, making the major league minimum. So given that we are going to not make an offer to Urias anyways, we're going to go ahead and trade him for Basabe, get at least something in return. We'll see if maybe the wealthy Yankees will also throw a little extra cash our way. Every little penny will be helpful as we potentially try to bring Soto on board, and if we're able to take a little bit of money from them now, maybe that declines the chance that they're going to be able to re-sign Mr. Soto. Still no contract. Like to see that. I guess if they had signed him to a contract, we'd potentially be able to include him in the trades. I should have known that. But I'm getting very nervous about this now because I think this could be a really interesting plan if it all comes together. And the Yankees won't throw in much money with Basabe, but we'll get $100,000 in addition to Basabe. It's better than nothing. We were going to let Urias go for nothing. So the fact that in addition to all of the really high-priced players, Basabe is a guy that we're able to bring on board into our organization, give us a little more infield depth. Like his glove, like his speed, like his ability to make contact. He's not going to draw many walks, and he's going to hit for no power. He's been a brutal offensive player over his brief major league career at this point, with a combined 45 WRC plus. But it's a lottery ticket. And you can see with Sam Haggerty, who we're just going to make no offer to, it's a similar situation. Basically, just some of the worst contracts in baseball are all we can get in return for him. We're going to also give Garver one final try. I'm not optimistic at all is what we're going to get here. Even retaining 80% of his contract, which kind of defeats the purpose of getting rid of him. Unless things have changed materially over the last week or so of game time, I'm not going to be impressed with the options. And you can see, even if we're keeping 80% of Garver's contract, we've got to take a awful contract back in return, most of which are larger and last for longer than Garver's contract himself. Even if we were to throw in arguably the top prospect in our system in Cole Young, which I really wouldn't want to do. It gives us better players in return, but they're still all generally players making really good money, or it's replacement level type players. And honestly, Cole Young is a big part of our strategy. Part of the reason we were willing to move on from guys like Polanco and Urias this offseason, replace them with the good gloves of Gordon and Allen potentially for the short term, is that we think Cole Young, hopefully by September call-ups next year, is going to be someone who can take over a middle infield spot for us with a much better bat than a lot of the middle infielders that we have on the team right now. So, and if we take the Garver retention down to a more reasonable 20% and include Cole Young, you can see we can get those potentially problematic big contracts from the Yankees, but those would take us out of Soto. And then we can get either mediocre players with big contracts or just kind of mediocre players who are making the league minimum. There's interesting guys out there, but I'm just not willing to include Cole Young or one of our top prospects to get it done. I don't think it's that critical. I think with the moves that we've made, we still potentially can get Soto and possibly add somebody else on with him. Maybe it won't be as expensive as Gleyber Torres. We'll find out shortly. Maybe we'll have to settle for a Pete Alonso type instead of a Gleyber Torres. I think he's going to make a little less, which would have surprised people 3 or 4 years ago, I'm sure. Right now, it's just a matter of seeing whether or not Goldschmidt accepts that qualifying offer, because if he does, then it may become a bit more important for us to consider moving on from Garver if we really do decide that we're going to make a play for Soto. And Paul Goldschmidt has accepted the QO. So that definitely puts a damper on our plans here. Makes it very pivotal to potentially move on from Garver. Definitely means that we can't go for both Soto and Torres. And it means that Soto is likely to be quite a challenge for us with $19 million coming onto the books. As I said, I don't mind bringing him back for a year. I didn't want to make a long-term commitment to him, but he's definitely a better bat at first base than what we would have had with Garver. But if we're really going to make a play for Soto now, we may have to suck it up and include a good prospect to get Garver off the books. I guess the other option would be we could potentially try to trade Goldschmidt. I guess since he's opted in, we can't see what the market is for him yet. Don't really know why, because he's got a new contract. He was signed yesterday, but we'll find out shortly. Free agency filings are tomorrow, and we'll take a look at what our true financial situation looks like at that time. And we made it to free agency. We'll take a quick look at the international free agents before we look at the real interesting things, which is going to be who made it to the domestic proven major league free agents. And it doesn't look like it doesn't look like a particularly interesting crew. And then the last two guys are very interesting. Kansuke Sho, 32-year-old out of Japan, good defensive outfielder. Looks like he's got a solid bat, looking for $15 million. And then Sergio Estrada out of Cuba. Looks like a potential all-star shortstop. Really nice glove. And a pretty interesting bat for a middle infielder as well. 30 years old, looking for $25.6 million a year. Don't know much about either of these guys, so we'll request scouting reports on them. I don't think either is going to be our first option, although some of that's dependent on who the actual major league free agents are. But they could be good second options. But Torres and Soto are both on the market. As I mentioned, we definitely can't go after both right now. But even with Goldschmidt opting in, we've got 35-ish million next year and 43 for extensions. So we can make a play for Soto if we want. Soto and Torres only happens if we're able to get out of the Garver or Goldschmidt contracts. So it's not a perfect situation. Garver, I'm guessing, is still going to be very unpopular, retaining 50% of his contract, and we just get absolutely horrible contracts in return that are more money and the same or more years. Javi Baez, Anthony Rendon, Chris Bryant, Trevor Story, some of the worst contracts in baseball. So Garver, probably stuck with him. Question is, what, if any, market is there for Mr. Goldschmidt? And it's actually pretty bad contracts also, which is a little disappointing. If we kept 20% of Goldschmidt, does that matter to anybody? No, can't really get any money off the books. So the dream of me bringing two Yankees on board to this team is probably done. But we are going to go after the big fish. I just think it would be incredibly fun to see Soto and J-Rod, who finished second and first in the AL MVP voting this past fictional season, in the same lineup. It would definitely give our offense a huge boost. We need a corner outfielder, and Soto is a 26-year-old who is hitting free agency, is about as young a top-end free agent as you're ever going to see on the market. He's looking for almost $40 million a year for 9 years, so it's not going to be cheap. I have a feeling he's going to want all of these options to be included. We're going to try to get him for a little bit less money, but we're definitely going to get an offer out there on Mr. Soto. And Soto looking for $39.6 million a year for 9 years. We're not even going to mess with the player options. He's got the leverage, but we're offering him $37.2 million average annual value, and the 4 years before he can opt out are only going to average $34.5 million a year. It's still a big contract for any team, much less a middle market team in terms of spending like the Mariners to potentially take on. But I got to try it. He's willing to think about the offer. So we're going to submit that 9-year, $335 million offer to Mr. Soto. Would love to bring him on board. And the initial feedback from Mr. Soto is positive. Says he's leaning strongly towards signing with Seattle. Supposedly the Padres, the Blue Jays, and the Guardians are also involved. Don't know whether he'll sign before the winter meetings, which are about 2 weeks away. Would love to get him locked up, though, before mid-December. Then we can kind of tackle anything else we want to do, but clearly there would not be much else to do if we're able to land Mr. Soto. And we were aggressive right at the outset of free agency, and Soto did not want to fool around. It's Saturday, November 30th, and he is joining J-Rod and Paul Goldschmidt in the middle of the Seattle lineup for the 2025 season. We'll have to give up a third-round pick for bringing him on board. The fans, not surprisingly, are ecstatic. Got a 4-point boost in fan interest to 86 from 82, bringing him on board. He has signed that deal for $335 million. Realistically, I think it's a 4-year deal with us, 33, 34, 35, and 36 before he is likely to opt out and hit free agency again. But with him locked up for the next 4 years, and with J-Rod locked up for much longer than that, we have got a very interesting middle of the order, particularly this upcoming season when we're also going to have Goldschmidt in the mix as well. Certainly not expecting the Mariners to be 11th in the American League in runs scored again this season. With J-Rod and Soto both in the prime of their careers in the middle of our lineup, can see it leaves us with not much money to spend at this point, but that was likely to be expected. Soto, Castillo, Rodriguez, all locked up for the long term. Or I guess you could fairly say that Castillo and Soto are just the medium term at this point. But I think it's going to be a lot of fun to have Julio Rodriguez and Juan Soto in the middle of our lineup. And as I said, maybe we strategically didn't play things perfectly with Goldschmidt. I thought there was a chance he would accept the QO. I actually thought there was better than a 50-50 coin flip that he would accept the QO, given that he said he was looking for $20+ million a year for 4 years. I don't mind having him back, despite the fact that he is getting older. He still was an above average offensive player for us a year ago, popular with the fans, and as a third option in the lineup behind Rodriguez and Soto, I think you could do a lot worse than Paul Goldschmidt. I don't know if it's quite the level that the Dodgers have right now with the back-to-back MVPs as the first three hitters in their lineup, but I don't think it's too far off of that. And with Soto locked up, we're going to call it an episode. I'm still going to potentially explore a bit offline if there is a way to realistically move on from Garver or Goldschmidt. Garver would certainly be the preference to move on from. He's locked up for 2 years, not making quite as much money as Goldschmidt, but Goldschmidt's certainly a better player. And Goldschmidt is now locked in as our first baseman. The thing with Garver is he can play a corner outfield spot for us as well, or end up being a DH against left-handed pitching. It's a lot of money to be paying him for that, but sometimes you have these bad contracts and you just got to deal with them. But I like where we are with this team. We've upgraded our defense at catcher, bringing on Vasquez as our backup. We've upgraded our defense in the middle infield with the additions of Allen and Gordon, alongside Moore and Crawford. We got 2 righties and 2 lefties among those 4 to mix and match at second and short and likely third at this point. Seth Brown is back. Dominic Canzone, probably going to be a 4th or 5th outfielder for us next year. And most importantly, we have Mr. Soto in the mix now as well. So we may not be done. I don't think we're going to be able to figure out a way to get out from under Garver or Goldschmidt without just taking a total financial bath, and I'm unwilling to do that. In retrospect, probably wish that I hadn't made the QO to Goldschmidt, because if we hadn't done that, we could be pursuing Torres right now, who's younger and would fit in really well as a third baseman with what we have, rather than another first base / DH / corner outfield type, which between Garver, Goldschmidt, Brown, and Canzone, and Soto, to be honest, we've got plenty of right now. But those are the breaks. I was maybe a little greedy trying to get the compensatory pick for Goldschmidt, but you never know how those things are going to turn out. With that, we're still excited. We've got Soto on board. I think this team's going to be real fun next year with those 2 in the middle of the batting order. I think they could put up some crazy numbers, even playing half of their games in Seattle. So I'm really looking forward to that. And we've still got most of the offseason ahead of us. Certainly we're not going to do anything else that rivals bringing Juan Soto on board, but optimistic about where we stand. And at this point, we've still got solid scouting and player development budgets. There is a part of me that wants to get real greedy right here. And if we put scouting and player development down to just over the baseline, that does give us enough money that we could go after Torres as well and really just go crazy for this upcoming season. I'm going to think about it. We're certainly in win now mode, given that we just brought Juan Soto on board for the next 4 years. And also given that this is a mini series, we know that I'm not going to be playing it for a decade. Something I'm going to think about before we finish up this episode, and I know I've made you think perhaps that we were done on a few occasions over the last 10 minutes or so. I did mean to, at the beginning of the episode, just let you know that what we were doing in the development lab this off season. So I'll touch on that really quickly. Working on plate discipline from J-Rod, which looked like it was a program with a good chance of success. We did work on trying to give Matt Brash more endurance. We knew that that was going to be a low probability, but looking at Brash's profile, if we can get a little more stamina out of him, he could be a really useful starting pitcher. I mean, right now he's kind of a 4 to 5 inning guy. If we could get that stamina up to a 40, then he's a 5+ inning guy most likely. That would be a huge improvement for us. And then we also invested in heavily in other pitchers as well, improving the control of Munoz and Santos. Those are both going well. Secondary pitch improvement for Logan Gilbert, not going great at this point, and increasing pitch movement for Brian Wu on track. And then we also invested in the top 2 prospects in our system, plate discipline with Cole Young, and then a lower probability of success with quality of contact for Harry Ford. But given that we think both of those players could be helping us at the end of this year, and we definitely envision Young as an important infielder for us in 2026, and Ford potentially as our starting catcher in the not too distant future. Wanted to make sure that we invested in both of them as well. But you can see we've got 4 of the 8 are frustrated, but 3 are on track, and Munoz is excelling in terms of improving his control, which, given that he walked 39 batters in 62 2/3 innings a year ago, if he continues excelling, that could be very positive for us in terms of what we expect from him next season. So we knew we weren't going to be investing a lot in terms of free agent dollars, in terms of bringing on pitching. And given that a lot of our pitchers were kind of younger and high potential guys, other than J-Rod, we invested heavily in the pitchers in the development lab for this 2024 to 2025 offseason. And with that, I will finally call it an episode. Real excited to have Soto on board. Just kind of want to get through this offseason and see what Soto and J-Rod and Goldschmidt can do in the middle of that lineup for us next year. If Kirby comes back healthy, I really think this is an interesting team. I'm really excited to see what Seattle's going to do on the field in 2025. But we've probably got another couple episodes until we get to that point. And until our next one, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.